This house is dangerous. There are terrible demons. Ouch!
I just got finished with my third playthrough of Resident Evil Requiem, and now seems like a pretty great time to give my thoughts on it before the topic gets stale and this video gets 0 views.
Resident Evil.
Starring Resident Evil newcomer FBI agent Grace Ashcroft stars as the game's main protagonist as she goes on a terrifying adventure of conspiracy, horror, and hardship as she returns to the location of the murder of her mother, Alyssa Ashcroft. On this journey, she encounters Resident Evil veteran Leon S. Kennedy as the secondary protagonist in Requiem, who suffers with a mutated strain of the T-virus which seems to develop to survivors of the Raccoon City incident. He, alongside Grace, uncover never-seen-before secrets relating to the Umbrella Corporation, destruction of Raccoon City, and Grace herself. Requiem grapples with 2 distinct playstyles dedicated to each protagonist separately. Grace is a survival horror game with resource management, claustrophobic rooms, and a stronger lean into the horror, which is akin to the slower-paced games of the Resident Evil franchise, like Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 7. Leon is an action-packed adventure, much like Resident Evil 4 and 5, with larger set pieces, boss fights, and this.
Woo! Feeling good!
The game is attempting to go for the 2 different tones known in the franchise, the survival and the action, both at the same time. Now, in earlier games, there was an attempt to balance these different tones, like how in Resident Evil Village there was the castle segments in the first half of the game, which later then developed into the more bombastic set pieces of the Heisenberg factory. However, never have they been attempted to go for it at the same time, going from one gameplay style to the other and hoping for the best that there will be no whiplash between these transitions. Now, individually, there's no question that the gameplay is really good. When playing as Grace, you will be terrified. Bullets are scarce like any other material in the game, but not like that ever matters. Even if you put an enemy down, there's still a guarantee that they won't stay dead, and instead, they'll reanimate to come at you even harder. In Leon segments, you are the terror. Equipped with your trusty Requiem revolver and indestructible hatchet, Leon guns down his enemies with ease as the gameplay completely switches genres into a fun and exciting ride with your old friend. Each of these segments are fantastic, going from shitting your pants in the point of view of a rookie to a B-list action movie with corny one-liners. But the question isn't, is the gameplay fun, but instead, do these different tones mesh well together? And in my opinion, yes. You see, when you switch between the 2 characters, the pattern is simple. When Grace's section becomes more crazy, then we switch to Leon, with his strong side, of course, being the action in Requiem. When switching to Grace, Leon's section starts to die down. So whenever the transition happens, we aren't dazed or confused trying to piece together what just happened. The game instead soft launches the player into the other character's playstyle so we can pick up where we left off. Now this next part dives into the narrative of Resident Evil Requiem, which also gets into spoilers. So if you haven't already played Requiem, skip to this time in the video as to avoid spoilers. Here is your only warning. Okay. The story of Resident Evil Requiem is a little bad. You see, here's the thing. I love Grace, and I think she's a breath of fresh air for Resident Evil, especially after the everyman attitude of Ethan Winters. The actress is amazing. However, the writing just doesn't seem to match. For example, the theme of the game seems to be centered around hope. But why? There's nothing in this game that supports this. Now, this could be a reference to when Spencer calls Grace his hope, which is a reference to his hope for redemption. But here's the thing. In Grace's post-report for the game, she says Spencer was a delusional old man who most likely only took Grace in for selfish reasons. A little side note as I'm editing. Turns out that Grace is not Spencer's hope, it's Elpis. And even then, that makes no sense, because he decides to hide a very powerful antiviral underneath Raccoon City with a code that nobody knows. Again, he is described as a senile old man. Just This entire decision makes no sense. Anyways, goodbye. Now, you could say that the hope is a reference to Grace's mother, Alyssa, when she calls Grace her hope before she dies. But why? Alyssa only has like 4 minutes of screen time, and at that point, I have to wonder why they even bothered making Grace Alyssa's daughter. For those that don't know, Alyssa is from Resident Evil Outbreak, and this was looking to be her return. Of course, that didn't happen. So at that point, why bother? We don't get any deep insight as to her and Grace's relationship, which just makes her death even more weaker in my opinion. It would have been real cool to see more of her and Grace's relationship so that when she meets Emily, we can get a similar dynamic and resulting into an even more emotional scene when she dies. Oh wait, Emily isn't even dead? And Grace isn't Alyssa's daughter? The reveal wouldn't be that bad if we didn't have to go through a tedious flashback scene. Wait, that's not even Grace? That's just a random girl who happens to resemble her? Even though the experiments took place before Grace was born? Oh well, at least we have a cool looking villain with an interesting... But do you see what I mean? The story of Requiem just lags behind in comparison to the gameplay. But to be honest, I don't think a lot of people will really care because nobody really comes to Resident Evil expecting The Last of Us. They come to Resident Evil to get the shit scared out of them. And thirst over Leon. Or Chris. Or Jill. Or Lady. Yeah, you get the point. All in all, Resident Evil Requiem is still a fun ride from start to finish and an amazing entry into the franchise. To finalize, I'm going to give Resident Evil Requiem a 4.5 out of 5.
But just take a look at this. It's forest. Oh my God.